today preaching on one of my favorite chapters in the Bible today. One of the things, we want the presence of the Lord to be with us. We've got to have the Lord in our hearts to have the presence of the Lord. And there are many people that are seeking in different places, and they're not finding it. And so I want to sing this song this morning to tell you where not to seek. All right. I walk by the tomb of Buddha, looked inside and saw the bone, traveled on to see Mohammed, all wrapped up in his grave clothes. Then I journeyed to a garden where old Joseph left him laid, the precious Lamb, God's only begotten, was no longer in the grave. If you knew him like I know him, you would know that he's alive. If you felt him like I feel him, resurrection deep inside, you know he's living and death is died. If you're wandering in the darkness, come and step into the light. Nail-scarred hands reach out to help you. They'll pull you safe from death to life. Friend, I too have stood where you stand. Could I trust in things unseen? Just one step in his direction, then in love he ran to me. If you knew him like I know him, you would know that
Thank you, Brother John. If that didn't ring your bell, you're clever. It must be broken. Turn, if you would, to Psalm 121 this morning. We're continuing the series of messages through the Psalms. Psalm 121, and this is one of the most popular Psalms in the entire book here. And I pray that it speaks to your heart today. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills. From whence cometh my help? My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth, and even forevermore. You notice right under where it says Psalm 121, it describes this as a song of degrees. And in the ancient days, you find that the Israelites would travel to Jerusalem for feast days at the temple. And so coming from their homes, making this long journey by foot, walking with their family and friends and enjoying the holiday travel. And so as they walked up to that natural incline to Jerusalem, they would sing some of these joyful psalms. There are 15 of these special psalms, the first of them being Psalm 120. You know, it sort of reminds me of years ago when I was here, even when I went on a mission trip to the Philippines, and I was about 2 hours outside of Manila, and we were in this sort of remote village. And on Sunday night, we had the worship service, and it was about a 2-hour worship service. Those folks love to worship. And they were singing and just having a great time worshiping. And then after the worship service, nobody had vehicles, so everybody had to walk to their little huts. And I was staying with a Filipino family in a hut. And I remember as we were walking, and just a large group of people, and they were laughing and talking and singing, and I was just so impressed with how joyful that they were, how contented that they were. It just sort of reminded me of that as we walked in a group and people walking back to their homes, and such a joyful time. Maybe you've had those joyful times, maybe on a vacation. You ever been on a vacation with your family and be in the car, and everybody at that moment is sort of happy, and you're doing a sing-along, and just sort of sing along. And probably by the time you got to your destination, you know, the kids were fighting and everything else, but at least there was a little happy moment as everybody's just sort of singing along. Well, the Psalms of descent or degrees were happy times for the children of God. I love what Psalm 42 verse 4 says this: "When I remember these things, I pour out my soul in me. For I had gone with the multitude, I went with them to the house of God, with the voice of joy and praise, with the multitude that kept holy day." And so it was a joyful time as they were traveling on that journey. Each of us is on our own life journey. And you find that we're traveling the road of life. And the roads of life, many times they get bumpy, they get trying. You find that sometimes we hit some potholes, don't we? Sometimes we take the wrong turn. Sometimes we lose our way. Sometimes in life the road seems to be very long and weary and dangerous. And, you know, the Bible reminds us that if you're a Christian, the Bible reminds us that we are pilgrims and strangers in a foreign land, and the roads are filled with great hazard there. So singing this song here of joy and encouragement, the pilgrims made their journey to Jerusalem. I want to share with you just 2 points this morning. I know that's unusual for a Baptist preacher, but just 2 points. And I pray that they speak to us when we think about our journey in life. If you notice the first couple of verses, it's in the first person, I. He talks about I and my. And then from verses 3 through 8, you find that he's speaking in the third person. He's speaking about the Lord. The Lord, what the Lord will do. He will not suffer your foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will slumber. He that keepeth Israel. So the first couple of verses are first person. He's speaking about himself, the psalmist here. And the first point is that those first 2 verses is, if you're a believer, you look up to the Lord. And if you're a believer, the second point, those verses 3 through 8 is, if you look up to the Lord will look out for you. That's basically what he's saying. That if you're a believer, you're the type of person, you look up to the Lord, and then God promises that he will look out for you. So this song here reminds us that we are to look up to the Lord. Now why? Because of the need for help. You know, life is difficult. Amen? Would you say that? Sometimes life gets to be pretty difficult. And as those pilgrims were traveling that road, they would gaze up to the horizon as they knew there were miles ahead of them, and they knew that there would be some twists and some turns there. They knew there was going to be dust and heat and darkness and a lot of thirsty miles there. But they knew that they needed help. The psalmist says here, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. And so he makes a statement. I'm going to lift up my eyes unto the hills. And then he asks a question. From whence cometh my help? Literally, where am I going to find help? And that's the question we all have to ask. Where are you going to find your help? You know, whenever you travel, I don't know about you, but there's always a measure of insecurity. There's a bit of concern whenever I head out on a long journey. You sort of wonder sometimes, and you get to thinking, well, what if something happens? Who am I going to call if I need help? And so what's happening here in the first 2 verses, you have what the writers call an internal monologue. In other words, talking to yourself. You ever do that? And as you talk to yourself and you're wondering, what if this happens, that happens? You know, just a few weeks ago, we went to Florida and to Orlando on vacation. And so we had to drive to Nashville, catch a plane, and we had a rental car, and we had reservations and all that. And, you know, of course, that little anxiety, you begin to think, well, what happens on the way to the airport? Our car breaks down and we miss our flight. Or what if we get there and there's a major storm and maybe the plane's going to be delayed for hours? Or what if we get there and, you know, they don't have our reservation for the car? What are we going to do? Just being stuck there. What do you do in that journey? There's a measure of insecurity that we may feel about the trip of life. There's that anxiety that we may feel sometimes. And, you know, certainly it's always a relief when you get there and everything works out okay and there's a sense of relief. But this song is reminding us that in the journey of life, we have a need for help. And he's looking up to the Lord and saying, Lord, I need you. There's a dependence, there's a trust in him. You know, sadly, sometimes we don't call upon the Lord until things get out of control. You know, we don't call upon the Lord until maybe we've gone off the side of the road or we've crashed the car. We don't call upon the Lord like we should. That's why we don't pray like we should. Because, you know, we're driving along on the journey of life and things are going pretty good. They're going our way. But friend, before long, there's going to be a crash. Before long, you're going to need the Lord. Remember that country song from years ago, Jesus, take the wheel? and sometimes we're driving, and sometimes in life we have to come along and say, Jesus, you need to take the wheel because, man, I've got us lost. I've got us in a mess here. And so the psalmist is acknowledging the need for help. You know, one of the most heartbreaking things as a pastor is to see so many times people who are leaving their life and they have no time for the Lord. They have no need for the Lord. But you know, one of the things that happens in life is what someone has described as those disruptive moments. When you realize, Lord, I need you. And if you've never experienced them, believe me, you're going to have those disruptive moments in life. It may be the death of a loved one. It may be a divorce. It may be a financial setback. It may be a sickness. And when you have those disruptive moments, in those disruptive moments, that's when you realize, Lord, I need you. And so the psalmist is talking about looking up to the Lord. Why? Because of the need for help. But it also indicates the choice for help. You see, in verse 2, he acknowledges the choice that he made. He said, listen, my help comes from the Lord. I've made that choice. Can I say it's a wise decision when you turn to him? Can I say that again? It's a wise decision when you turn to the Lord. You see, in this particular day, in those mountains, there were these high places, and these high places had been centers for Canaanite pagan worship. And so the Canaanites would identify with the gods of these mountains here. The Old Testament calls them high places. As a matter of fact, the Old Testament refers to these high places over 78 times. And so when the Jews entered into the Promised Land, they did not destroy them as they should have, and often ended up worshiping them just as well. And so there they were on those mountains, and they were worshiping, tragically, pagan gods, pagan idols. And the question today is, aren't there still those pagan gods and idols around? Aren't people still worshiping the pagan gods and idols? They worship sports. I love sports, but you know you can worship sports. They worship entertainment. You know, I like entertainment, but you know, you can worship it. You know, why do you think so many of our churches are empty nowadays? Because people are out entertaining themselves, whatever it may be. They worship pleasure. They worship money. Can I tell you, when you look up to those things, those idols, friend, you're not going to find much guidance. And you're going to find that it will lead you to a journey that will be a wreck for your life. The psalmist says, I've made a choice. My help cometh from the Lord. And instead of worshiping the mountains, we're to worship the one who created the mountains. And so he reveals where to look for help. He said, look to the Lord. You know, nowadays, traveling is so much easier because we have what? We have these GPSs and we have these apps. And I have on my phone an app called Waze. And it spoils you. I mean, Waze tells you exactly where to go and where to turn. It tells you, hey, if there's a wreck ahead. It tells you if there's a car on the side of the road. It tells you even if there's a state trooper ahead, you know, it tells you those things. And so traveling is so much easier nowadays, and it's so much easier depending on that app than depending upon myself, because I have no sense of direction. I get lost. And so you find that it helps me out, and it makes traveling so much better than me trying to figure it all out on my own. And that's the way it is with the Lord. Your journey in life will be so much easier if you choose the Lord. If you let him guide you, if you follow him, and if you let him direct your path. Isn't it amazing? He offers grace instead of guilt. He offers forgiveness instead of condemnation. He offers peace instead of worry and anxiety. And so the psalmist comes along and he's referring to himself, and he said, you know, from whence do I get my help? He says, my help cometh from the Lord. Now notice this. He tags on there, which made heaven and earth. These were not just words added to sort of dress up the verse there. You find that they were chosen quite deliberately. Several times in the Psalms would use that phrase quite often. For example, Psalm 115, verse 15. Ye are blessed of the Lord, which made heaven and earth. Over in Psalm 146, listen to this. Psalm 146, verse 5 and 6. Happy is he that hath the God of Jacob. Happy is he that hath the God of Jacob for his help, whose hope is in the Lord his God, which made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is therein, which keepeth the truth forever. And several times throughout the scriptures, it talks about the Lord who made heaven and earth. Now think about that. The idea of being loved and helped by the Creator who hung the stars in the sky, who keeps the earth on its course. That ought to be encouraging to us. The one who made the heavens and the earth. Friend, if he can guide the planets, then surely he can guide the steps of our life. Amen? Isn't that true? And the psalmist said, I'm looking to the one who guides the planets, who's made the heavens and the earth. I've made the choice. I'm going to cast all my cares upon him, the one who made everything that you can see or touch or imagine. I'm coming to the one who I know cares, but also who can, because he has all power. He made the heaven and the earth. So when we are helpless, what do? We can cry unto the great helper. My help cometh from the Lord. Hey, he's the one who made the heavens and the earth. So here they are singing. What are they singing about? They're singing about, we look up to the Lord. I have to ask myself, is that reflective of my life? Am I a person who is always looking up to the Lord? And if I look up to the Lord, I want you to notice the second point. The Lord will look out for me. He says that over and over again, that he's going to provide for us, he's going to protect us, he's going to preserve us. He looks out for us. I don't know, I sort of like knowing the Lord looks out after me. Now notice he talks about how he provides for us in verses 2 through 5. My help cometh from the Lord, the one who made the heaven and the earth. He will not suffer my foot to be moved. He that keepeth me will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither sleep or slumber. The Lord is my keeper. The Lord is the shade upon my right hand. And so think about that. He will not suffer your foot to be moved. You know what that means? He sees you. He sees you. He sees what's going on in your life, and he says he's not going to allow your foot to be moved. He sees you. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows what you're going through. He knows your name. The Bible says he knows the number of hairs on your head. You say, what does that mean? That means he has such an intimate knowledge of you. And if he knows the number of hairs upon your head, then he's up to date on the worries in your life and the struggles in your life. When he says he will not suffer thy foot to be moved, he's simply saying he's not going to let you fall flat on your face. You see, if I'm really trusting in him and I'm looking up to him, he says, I'm not going to let you fall flat on your face. Just a few weeks ago, we took our younger granddaughter to Walmart and said, you need a bicycle. It's time for you to get a bicycle. And so we were there in Walmart, and she was checking out different bicycles, and I said, well, get on this one and see how it feels. And so we were just driving up the aisles at Walmart, on a bicycle. And people socially distanced from us for sure, but she was trying to pedal and doing that, and I was sort of holding her on the back, let her try that bicycle, and I kept reassuring her, I'm not going to let you fall. She got anxious, and she, did what she did trying to learn to ride that bicycle. I said, I'm not going to let you fall. And God comes along to us when we call unto him and cry to him, and he says, I'm not going to let you fall. That's what he does for us. He's looking out for us. The Bible says here, in verse 3, he that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. Somebody says, God works the night shift. Aren't you glad of that? And he's always there, no matter when it is that you need him. In the lowest and darkest hour of the night, he's always there. You know why? Because he does not sleep or slumber. I've shared this little story with you many times, but it's always ministered to my heart about this fellow who had a lot upon his mind. He couldn't sleep. He was anxious. He was worried about some issues in his life. He tossed and turned. You ever done that? Just, you're worried, you're tossing and turning. So finally he thought, I can't sleep. I'm just going to get up. And he took his Bible and he began to read Psalm 121. And he read there, the Lord neither sleeps nor slumbers. And it was like the voice of God spoke to him and simply said, hey, there's no need for both of us to stay up all night. I'm going to stay up anyways. Why don't you go to bed and go to sleep and get a good night's rest? Isn't that great to know? So many times we worry, we fret, wonder how things are going to work out. But as you read the Bible, you get reassured that when you call upon Him for help, He's always there. He never sleeps. He never takes a day off. He's never out of town. He's always right there. He's watching you and loving you. Remember the story of Elijah? Elijah on Mount Carmel, and there was that showdown with the 450 prophets of Baal. And there was a contest between Baal and the God of Israel. And the question was, who was the real God? And each was to make a sacrifice there on the altar and call on their respective gods to consume the sacrifice with fire. So the prophets of Baal went first, and from morning till noon they cried out to their God to send fire to consume the sacrifice, but the heavens were silent. They cried out loud, they leaped about, they rolled on the ground, they even cut themselves to let the blood flow. But nothing helped. And then you find, Elijah's had a little mean streak about him. He couldn't resist the moment. And this is what he said to them. He began to mock them and said, cry aloud, for he is a God. Either he is meditating, or he's busy, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he is sleeping and must be awakened. Well, you know what happened? You know the rest of the story. Elijah then prayed, and God answered in such an incredible way and sent a fire to consume the sacrifice. God is always keeping watch. He won't let you fall flat on your face. He will always provide for you. And then he says he also protects us in verse 5 and 6. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. We may experience it, with the weather we've been having the last few days, but boy, in Israel at that time, travelers always felt a sense of deep anxiety about the heat and the sun. They would be concerned about getting sunstrokes, and because heat was a great danger. What did the Lord say? The Lord would be their shade. He would protect them. Paul Harvey used to tell this story. It's a remarkable story that during World War II, a B-29 took off from Guam for Kokura, Japan. It was going there on a bombing mission. And when it got to its primary target, it began to circle above a gigantic cloud that covered the target for, first of all, 30 minutes, and then 45 minutes, and then coming close to an hour. And all of a sudden, they realized the gas supply was beginning to dwindle. Well, the crew felt like they had no choice but to pass up their primary target. So they decided to hit their secondary target, which was Nagasaki. And they unleashed, what was known as that atomic bomb. Well, just a week before, and they did not know this, that thousands of Allied prisoners of war, the biggest concentration of Americans in enemy hands, had been moved to a camp in Kokura. It was a miracle. It was that solitary cloud that prevented thousands of Americans from dying that day. You see, that cloud being there would not allow them to drop that bomb, and it saved the lives of thousands of American prisoners. In the very same way, God promises to be our shield, our shade. And sometimes Satan loves to drop those bombs of doubt and discouragement and depression and despair and disappointment. And the psalmist says, God is my protector. He's my shade. And he says, the sun shall not smite thee. You know, there's so many assaults on you on the journey of life. And he says, God is my protector. And he used very figurative language here. He says, nothing, either the terrors of the night or the sun of the day can harm us, because God is the one who's protecting us. And so he's the shade against the visible perils of the day and the hidden perils of the night. The psalmist said, he protects me. But then he says, he preserves me. Look in verses 7 and 8. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. In other words, he's going to help you make it through. Remember what Jesus taught us how to pray? He said, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, literally the evil one. The Lord's going to help us make it through. There's so much evil in this world, isn't there? He says, the Lord's going to preserve you. The Lord's going to help you make it through. He preserves us from evil. He preserves us every day. Notice what he says in verse 8. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth. Every time you walk out that door, every day you walk in it, guess what? The Lord promises to be with you. He preserves us. He's watching you, protecting you, preserving you. Whether you go out to travel around the block or you go out to travel around the world, guess what? The Lord says He's your comings and your goings. He's always going to be there with you. He's your keeper. And here's the wonderful thing. He preserves us for eternity. He shall preserve thy soul. He shall preserve your coming out and your coming in, and from this time forth. And listen to this. Even forevermore. God is not only faithful to the end, He's faithful beyond the end. You see what God does? He does it 24/7, now and forever. Isn't that great to know? You know, Jesus told us, He said, hey, the Lord's going to preserve you, save your soul. He said, I give unto them eternal life, and they will never perish, and neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. Isn't that great to know? You see, if you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you're in His hands. You're in His hands. He's never going to let you go. Isn't that great to know? Not now, not forever. He's never going to let you go. That's the beauty of it. I picked this up in Gatlinburg many, many years ago. And it's a little statue, and it's a picture of Christ. And the eyes are such that wherever you go in the room, the eyes follow you. You ever seen that before? And it's just a reminder that God is always watching you. There was an unbeliever who was talking to a believer one time, and he said, who had one of those little statues, and he said, doesn't that make you awfully nervous? He said, no. It just simply reminds me that God can't keep His eyes off of me. He loves me so much. And that's what the psalmist is saying to us. He's saying, listen, when I look up to the Lord's going to be looking out for me. And let me tell you, you need Him in your life. And I want to ask you this morning, are you looking up to the Lord for your help? Are you letting the wisdom of the world help you? Are you letting ungodly advice help you? Or are you looking up to the Lord? And the Lord comes along and says, if you look up to me, I'm going to be looking out for you. And how true that is. It's simply the joy of having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. You see, you're on a journey, this journey called life. One day it's going to end. And on this journey, there's going to be some rough roads you're going to be taking. I'm telling you, it's a lot better when the Lord's with you. When you hit those difficult roads, when you hit those potholes, when you face those difficult times in life, it's so much better knowing the Lord is there with you to help see you through. And he says, you know, you're going to die one day, but I'm not going to forget you then. You're going to be with me forevermore. And that's the joy of knowing Christ as our Lord and Savior. Let me ask you something this morning. Do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? Has there ever been a time in your life where you cried out to him and said, Lord, I can't save myself. Help me. Save me. And guess what he will do? When you by faith cry out to him and say, Lord, I'm lost. I can't save myself. I can't find my way. When you call upon him, he promises to save you. Placing your faith and trust in him. And you have that relationship for everyday life, but not just everyday life. You have that for all of eternity, forever. And if you don't know him in a personal way, just call upon his name. Who do I call for help, the psalmist said? I call upon the Lord. And this morning, if you need to do that, friend, it's the greatest decision you will ever make. Maybe you'd be here as a Christian, and you're a Christian, but let me ask you, on the journey of life, is he leading you, guiding you? Are you following him? You see, all these promises that God makes in verses 3 through 8, he's going to look out for us. But if we're ignoring him, you know, we're on our own. And let me tell you, when I've done things on my own, it's not very pleasant. And he wants you to follow him. I'm going to ask with their heads bowed and eyes closed, oh Lord, if there be anyone among us who needs to call upon you for salvation, I pray that today would be that day. Lord, we thank you so much that when we cry out, Lord, I need help, you have a listening ear. Lord, you know exactly what's going on in our life. And you promise that when we call upon you and trust in you, you're not going to let us fall flat upon our face. You're going to provide for us and protect us and help us. So, Lord, I just pray that today in our hearts there will be such a sensitivity to your voice. And whatever you might be speaking to us about today, if it be salvation, if it just be our commitment to you, Lord, whatever it might be, may we follow you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. And this morning, as we have this hymn of invitation, if you'd be that person to say, I don't know him as my Lord and Savior, but today I've called upon him and I want to follow him. Maybe today you'd be a Christian and you say, I know I'm saved, I'm a Christian, but boy, I haven't really been following him. And today, he's convicted you of that. Maybe you'd be here and God's leading you to join with the church family here. We'd love for you to come. But as we stand, as we sing, whatever God puts upon your heart, follow him. That's the wisest thing.